I read Gatsby probably when I was a teenager, which is when most people read it the first time. And I just remember thinking it was a wonderful book, and I loved it. And then when I got to graduate school, I noticed what I mentioned in one of the questions that was addressed to me after the talk, that Fitzgerald was not held in as high a regard as Hemingway and some of his other contemporaries. And I felt that that was wrong. And so I began to write about Fitzgerald, to read Fitzgerald, to teach Fitzgerald. And then the other thing about Fitzgerald is what I said about Gatsby is true, that every time you read it, you see new things. So every time I taught it, every time I read it, every time I was asked to speak about it, I found new things to talk about. I don't like to spend all my time talking about books in terms of what they're about. I'm fascinated by the writing process, by how they're about what they're about. And I think Fitzgerald is, at his best, is a very fruitful source of that. One thing I will say, I live in Maryland, and Fitzgerald and Zelda and their daughter are all buried in a cemetery very near where I live, in the town of Rockville, Maryland. And in 1996, the town of Rockville, Maryland decided they would have an annual festival in Fitzgerald's honor, and that we would give an award every year to an American writer in Fitzgerald's name. And over the years, we've given it to some very important writers. At the time we gave it to each writer, I didn't know how they felt about Fitzgerald. That wasn't a criterion of giving the award. I mean, they were given the award because of what they'd written. And it was amazing, and there have been 20 of those now, and some of them are very important writers, John Updike, Norman Mailer, Joyce Carol Oates. It's amazing how many of them have come to that ceremony and talked about how they admired Fitzgerald and how much he had meant to them as a young writer, and how much they admired The Great Gatsby. And I'm forever seeing things in, like the New York Times Book Review does a feature where they interview a writer each Sunday, and they'll frequently ask them what writers meant a lot to you as a young writer. And in the most unlikely places, a mystery writer or a science fiction writer will say Fitzgerald. And I sometimes don't even know why. I'd like to think it's that mixture of subject matter and style that we're talking about. I hope it's just because of the beauty of the writing. Yeah, I think he's alive and well as a major American writer.